Welcome to CozySideAudio, where every story pulls you deeper. If you like the thrill, the mystery, and the chase, like, share, and subscribe before the next clue disappears. CozySideAudio presents The Afterlight. Don't Go Out at Dark Part 2, Chapter 14, The Return Today. The first sound Junie remembered was the wind. Real wind, not the kind that hummed inside the tunnels, not the ghost breath that moved through bones and afterlight veins, but the high, lonely moan of air moving through trees. She woke to it, blinking against a sky so pale it looked washed of color. Morning. The real world. For a few seconds, she thought maybe she had dreamed the rest of the cavern, the black sun, Mixon's hand against the glass. Maybe it was just the oxygen deprivation and the dark playing tricks again. But then she saw Izzy, sitting on a curb a few yards away, arms wrapped around herself, her face streaked in soot and streaks of blue residue that glittered faintly in the dawn light. Ashcroft was still. No birds, no footsteps. The entire town looked frozen mid-breath. A delivery truck sat idling in the distance, door open, driver gone, curtains were drawn. Somewhere, a wind chime tinkled off-key, faint as if the air itself were learning a new tune. Junie sat up. The motion sent pain rippling through every part of her body. Her arms were raw where the rope burns from the cable ladder had scoured them. Her palms were blistered. When she looked down, she realized her clothes were scorched in places, faint streaks where the blue light had touched fabric. She stood slowly, her legs trembling. The air felt heavier than it should have. It wasn't just exhaustion, it was pressure, like standing at the bottom of something. "Izzy?" Junie whispered. Izzy looked up. Her eyes were bloodshot, pupils still pinpricks. "We made it?" Junie nodded. For now. They began walking toward Main Street. The road underfoot was cracked in fine spiderweb patterns, as if the ground had flexed and never quite settled back. The white paint of the crosswalk shimmered faintly. She thought she was imagining it, until Izzy stopped and whispered, "It's glowing." Junie crouched, touched the asphalt. Cold, hard. But beneath the surface, faint blue veins glimmered, pulsing once every few seconds, like breath. She withdrew her hand, wiping it on her jacket. "Don't touch it," she said automatically. She remembered the way the cavern walls had throbbed when they ran that sick pulse like a heartbeat syncing with her own. Something about the glow now felt synchronized. Izzy's voice was barely there. "Do you think anyone else saw it?" Junie hesitated. They had to. They turned the corner toward the square and froze. The town was awake now. Or trying to be. People stood outside their houses in robes and work boots, shielding their eyes against the weird light. Someone was already sweeping shattered glass from a storefront. A man was yelling that a gas main must have ruptured underground. 2 women argued about whether it had been an earthquake. Every conversation was loud, too loud, as if everyone had decided to speak over the memory of the silence. No one mentioned the blue glow. No one looked at the storm drains. Junie stopped at the edge of the crowd. She wanted to scream. You don't see it, but even Izzy stayed quiet beside her, shoulders hunched. The town was pretending, like always. Sheriff Haddon's truck pulled up beside the diner. He stepped out, coffee still in hand, uniform crisp. There was dust on his boots, fine blue-gray dust that caught the light, but he didn't seem to notice. He waved to Junie. "You girls all right? Heard you went missing for the night. Your mom's been tearing half the county apart looking for you." Junie just stared at him. "We were underground," she said. "The mines, there's something down there." The sheriff frowned. "You mean old smelter tunnel? That thing collapsed years ago, Junie. You kids shouldn't be anywhere near it." "I saw my brother," she said. That made him stop. For just a second, his eyes flicked not disbelief exactly, but something wary. Then his expression hardened. "Junie," he said softly, "you need to stop doing this to yourself." Izzy opened her mouth. "She's not lying." "Izzy," he said, and that single word carried a warning. "You'd best get home before your dad finds out where you were." Izzy wilted. Junie turned away. "You think I'm making this up? Go look yourself." But Haddon didn't. He just looked at her with that tired, small-town pity. "You've been through enough, kid. Go get some rest." She walked away before she hit him. Her mother's house felt too bright, too clean. The curtains were drawn wide, sunlight slanting across the kitchen floor. The TV was on low, some morning talk show where everyone smiled too hard. The smell of coffee filled the air. Normal. Junie! Her mother was there in an instant, arms tight around her, voice shaking. Where were you? Oh my God, your face! Look at you, you're filthy! Junie stood stiff in her arms. Mom, stop! Her mother pulled back, her own face blotchy with exhaustion. The sheriff said you went down near the quarry again. Junie, I can't do this anymore. You can't keep... Mixon's alive. The words silenced the room. The TV kept murmuring, but the space between them went dead. Her mother's eyes filled. Junie? I saw him, Mom. He's under there. The whole town, there's something under it. Her mother covered her mouth, shaking her head. You need to stop this. It's been 3 years. I'm not crazy, Junie shouted, slamming her hand against the counter hard enough to rattle a mug. You think I want this? I didn't imagine it. There's light and sound and... Her voice cracked. The glow from the tunnels still seemed to flicker behind her eyes when she blinked. Her mother just stepped back, trembling. You need sleep. That's all. Junie laughed, a sound too sharp. You're all pretending. Her mother's voice broke. It's what we do to survive. The words lingered long after Junie stormed upstairs. By the next morning, the town had already rewritten what had happened. The Ashcroft Gazette ran a headline. Minor seismic event damages underground utility lines. The article mentioned nothing of the blue light, the quake's strange rhythm, or the dead fish that had floated up in the river by dawn. The mayor issued a statement urging calm. The word resonance appeared once, buried in a quote from an engineer no one had ever heard of. Junie read it twice, then tore the page to shreds. She hadn't seen Izzy since that morning. The girl's father, Mr. Roan, was a heavy man with oil-stained hands and a permanent scowl. When Junie showed up at their door, he met her on the porch and said flatly, "Don't you ever come near my daughter again." Junie didn't argue. She just looked past him, toward the dark window where she thought she saw movement. But no curtain shifted. As she walked back through town, she noticed how normal everything looked again. Kids playing on bikes, the church bells ringing, the smell of someone grilling onions drifting through an open window. But beneath it all was that low hum. The same pulse, faint, constant. When trucks rolled by, their engines seemed to sync with it for a second before fading. The power lines buzzed in rhythm. Even the crickets at dusk chirped too evenly, like metronomes. No one else seemed to notice. Junie started staying up late, sketching by candlelight. She didn't trust the electricity anymore. It flickered sometimes. And when it did, she swore she could hear whispers in the static. Her desk became a museum of obsession. Scraps of paper, sketches of tunnels, afterlight veins, and symbols. She kept drawing Mixon's face, trying to remember every detail, his eyes, his hair, the scar under his chin, but each time it came out wrong. The features blurred, replaced by the faint outline of something else. At night, she dreamed of him standing in the blue light, lips moving but no sound coming out. She'd wake with her ears ringing and her fingers cold. By the third night, she stopped dreaming. She just listened. The sound was always there, faint, patient, a hum just below the edge of hearing. If she held her breath long enough, she could almost feel it answer her heartbeat. Once she thought she heard his voice hidden in it, whispering from somewhere deep under the floorboards. Junie. The word was soft, impossible. She pressed her ear to the ground. Nothing? Then, faintly, a vibration, like someone tapping from below. A week later, Izzy found her. Late afternoon, behind the old high school bleachers. Junie was sitting cross-legged, sketching in her notebook. Izzy crouched beside her, glancing around to make sure no one saw. "You look awful," Izzy said. Junie smiled faintly. "Thanks. You look grounded." "I am," Izzy said. "But I had to see you. My dad's been weird. He won't go near the mines. He keeps turning up the radio like he's trying to drown something out." Junie's pencil stilled. "He hears it too." "I don't know. He won't talk about it. Everyone's acting like nothing happened." "That's what they always do," Junie said. Her eyes were dark-ringed but steady. Pretend it's gone until it eats them. Izzy sat down beside her, arms hugging her knees. You really think Mixon's alive? I don't think, Junie said. I know. I saw him. He was in something like glass or crystal, and when I touched it, he spoke. He warned me. About what? Junie's gaze drifted toward the horizon, where the river shimmered faintly in the fading light. The black sun. Izzy shivered. You can't go back down there. I'm not letting it end like this. Izzy hesitated, then reached into her jacket. I brought something. She handed Junie a folded paper, yellowed from years of wear. Junie recognized the handwriting instantly, Mixon's messy scrawl. The page was filled with circles, lines, and looping shapes like sound waves frozen mid-motion. She remembered these, his maps, the ones he'd drawn before he vanished. Where'd you get this? Junie whispered. It was in the library's lost and found box. Someone must have dropped it years ago. I thought you'd want it. Junie unfolded it slowly, tracing the lines with her finger. Her heart raced. It wasn't random, not this time. Some of the loops looked familiar, like the waveform patterns from the seismic charts she'd seen in the Gazette, and some matched the markings she'd seen scratched into the mine walls near the Afterlight veins. A code. A language. She looked up, eyes alight. He was mapping the sound. What? He figured it out. Mixon was listening to them. These patterns, they're not drawings. They're frequencies. Izzy's face paled. Frequencies of what? Junie smiled faintly, that dangerous, feverish light flickering behind her eyes. Of where they are. That night, Junie lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Her mother's soft snoring echoed from the next room. The house creaked with the slow exhale of cooling wood. Outside, the street lamps glowed the same sodium orange as always. But beneath it all, the hum. The same low rhythm, pulsing through the mattress, through the floorboards, through her bones. She imagined it winding up through the pipes, through the hollow drain beneath her window, back into the earth's pulse. She closed her eyes and listened. Don't wake it, June. The voice came from nowhere, and everywhere at once, a memory, a warning, a promise. Junie whispered back, It's already awake. She turned on her side and looked at the map lying open beside her on the pillow. The looping lines seemed to shimmer faintly in the dark, pulsing in rhythm with the hum. She reached out and placed her hand on the paper. The pulse matched her heartbeat for a second. Then it didn't. By morning, she had a plan. And the sound beneath Ashcroft was no longer just a memory. It was calling. Chapter 15. The Map of Sound. The attic had become her ocean. Junie sat cross-legged on the floorboards beneath the single, clouded window. Surrounded by the wreckage of Mixon's notebooks, the water-warped pages fanned around her like bleached shells. Morning light glared through the glass, cold and colorless. Dust drifted in the beams like slow snow. Outside, the town was awake again. Trucks rumbling toward the docks, gulls circling the landfill at the edge of the marsh. The sound of it all, normal life resuming, made her want to scream. Because under that rhythm of engines and wind and waves, she still heard it. That hum, that living tremor, it pulsed through her jaw, her teeth, the soft spot behind her ears like a memory that refused to fade. She rubbed her temples, trying to focus on the papers before her. Most were useless now, smeared with salt water and charcoal streaks, but some still bore fragments of Mixon's strange geometry. Circles tangled with lines, dotted spirals, annotated with odd phrases. Reverse fall, breathing frequencies, pressure bloom. At first glance, they were nothing more than Doodle's obsessive spirals and angles born of a restless mind. But when she rotated one of the pages, when she tilted it toward the light, something inside her clicked. It wasn't random. None of it was. Junie dragged a finger over one of the spirals. The shape reminded her of a sonar readout, or the ripples around a pebble dropped in water. She closed her eyes and hummed very softly. The paper trembled. Not from the wind, not from her hand. From resonance. Her heart skipped. She hummed again, matching the pitch she remembered from the mind's that subhuman chorus that filled her chest until she thought her ribs would shatter. The ink circles blurred, doubled, seemed to shimmer with a faint, oily sheen. And then, just as suddenly, the effect stopped. The page went still. Junie stared. Her pulse pounded in her throat. "Mixon?" she whispered, the name breaking into the silence like a prayer. "What were you doing down there?" That night, she dreamt of him again. Not the boy from before. Not the laughing, mud-smeared Mixon with his scavenged driftwood swords, but something quieter, translucent. His voice wasn't a voice anymore, but a tone, a sustained note that thrummed inside her skull. The dream was lightless except for that sound. It bent space, making her feel both enormous and small, as if she were standing inside the hollow body of a bell. She woke before dawn, sweating, trembling, the last echo of that hum still rattling her ribs. And then came the knock. Izzy was standing at the back door, wrapped in her father's old fishing jacket. Her eyes were red, and her hair stuck out in sleep-tangled wisps beneath her hood. She looked like she hadn't been able to stop thinking either. "I couldn't sleep," Izzy murmured. "I kept hearing it again. The low tone, like it followed us." Junie hesitated, then stepped aside. The house was silent except for the creak of the stairs and the faint clicking of the heater. They climbed to the attic without speaking. Izzy paused when she saw the mess. The papers, the cracked jars of mineral samples, the field recorder half buried in dust. "You've been up all night," Izzy said softly. Junie nodded. "He wasn't drawing random junk, Izzy. Look." She spread several sheets across the floorboards, arranging them edge to edge. When viewed together, the patterns began to align waves of black ink, linking between pages like topographic ridges. "I think this," Junie said, tracing a trembling line, "is a map." Izzy squinted. "A map of what?" Junie hesitated. "Sound." By mid-morning, they had pinned the surviving pages to the slanted wall under the window, layering transparent tracing sheets over them. Junie marked frequencies in pencil, referencing Mixon's field notes from months earlier, a half-finished experiment with water vibrations. As she did, a pattern began to emerge. Certain tones seemed to correspond to directions, others to depths. The drawings weren't random, they were recordings in a sense. Mixon had been documenting where the sounds were strongest. "It's like he was triangulating them," Junie murmured, "the way you'd track a radio signal." Izzy glanced up from the notebook she was helping organize. Or something tracking him? Junie froze. The thought landed heavy between them. The silence afterward was unbearable, a silence too wide, too deliberate. She switched on the field recorder just to fill it, but the static that came through wasn't random either. Beneath the hiss, the hum breathed again. Faint. Waiting. At noon, they took Mixon's diagrams to the cliffs. Wind raked across the grass. The sea was dull green, flecked with silver. In the far distance, a freighter crawled along the horizon, a dark block against pale water. Junie carried the recorder and a small tuning fork she'd taken from the lab's sound kit. Izzy held a compass and Mixon's marked notebook. "According to this," Junie said, spreading the papers on a rock, "there should be a convergence point near the old quarry. That's where the frequencies overlap." Izzy frowned. "The quarry's fenced off." "I know." "Junie, I just need to hear it again." Izzy bit her lip, but didn't argue. They followed the path down toward the abandoned road, boots crunching over gravel. The quarry was half filled with rainwater now, a gray mirror reflecting the sky. Rusted machinery stood at the edges like skeletons. The air tasted metallic. Junie knelt near the lip of the water and struck the tuning fork. The tone rang high and pure. The surface rippled. For a moment, nothing happened, and then a faint vibration shivered through the soles of her boots. The water quivered again, this time without her doing anything. A low resonance rolled up from below, deep enough to make her spine ache. Izzy's eyes went wide. "Junie, stop." But Junie didn't. She adjusted her pitch, humming under her breath, matching the frequency until the sound around her began to harmonize. The ripples in the quarry water became circular, perfect, almost hypnotic. And then a sound like a sigh, a long exhalation rising from the earth. The tuning fork slipped from her hand and fell into the water. The hum dropped an octave, heavy as thunder. Both girls stumbled backward, heartbeats hammering in sync with the vibration. Junie could feel it again, the presence, the same vastness she'd felt underground, pushing through stone, moving toward them. She clamped her hands over her ears. "It's here," she gasped. "It's underneath us." Izzy pulled her by the arm. "We need to go." They ran. The hum pursued them in pulses, fading only when the wind rose hard enough to tear through it. By the time they reached the road, Junie could barely breathe. She turned back once and saw nothing but still water, smooth as glass. But she knew now the map wasn't finished, and neither was Mixon's work. That night, back in the attic, Junie laid out the final pattern with trembling hands. The quarry, the mines, the oceanic shelf all connected through nodes of frequency. It was like the town itself had been built over a living instrument, an enormous resonant body. Every explosion, every sonar ping, every mining operation, all of it had woken something that was meant to sleep. Izzy sat across from her, pale but determined. If Mixon figured this out, she said, then maybe he also found a way to control it. Junie nodded slowly. To communicate with it. The thought sent a cold thrill through her. Outside, the sea began to rise with the wind. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled not from the sky, but from deep beneath the ground. Junie looked at the final page pinned above the window. Mixon's handwriting was jagged, hurried. Only 3 words were legible in the corner, scrawled in graphite. "Listen to find." And below it, drawn in faint concentric circles, a mark that looked eerily like an ear or the spiral of a shell. Chapter 16. The Whispering Survivors. The air beneath the quarry tasted of copper and rain. Junie had never meant to return so soon, but the sound had haunted her sleep. Each night it drew her closer, a low harmonic that threaded through her dreams like a beacon. She'd wake with her hands shaking, her pulse still matched to its rhythm. And so, when the morning fog rolled in thick as milk and the town was still asleep, she packed the field recorder, a flashlight, and Mixon's torn notebook into her backpack. Izzy was waiting by the road already, eyes bruised from sleeplessness, face set with quiet resolve. "Your dad?" Junie started. "He thinks I'm at school," Izzy said flatly. "Let's go." The quarry road was soft with mist. When they reached the chain-link fence, Junie passed her backpack through a gap and squeezed after it, catching her sleeve on the metal. The scrape bled immediately, a small bright thing against the gray. The descent was worse than either had remembered. The slope of loose shale led into darkness that seemed to breathe. Junie's flashlight flickered over half-buried mining equipment, a cracked helmet, a rusted rail, the carcass of a generator. Water dripped somewhere, steady as a metronome. At the bottom, they found the shaft, a circular tunnel half-collapsed, sealed decades ago with concrete, except now part of it was broken open. The fissure ran jaggedly down the wall, wide enough for a person to slip through if they crouched. Izzy's whisper trembled. "That wasn't there before." Junie pressed a hand against the edge. The concrete was smooth, melted, almost not broken by tools or dynamite, but warped, as though something had pushed outward from within. The hum began again, soft at first, then gathering weight, like a foghorn beneath the earth. Junie's chest tightened. She turned on the recorder, capturing the vibration as it swelled. And then they went in. The passage narrowed quickly, the rock walls slick with condensation. Their boots made no sound on the wet clay. At one point the tunnel forked, one branch leading down, the other sloping up into the dark. Junie checked Mixon's map by flashlight, a trembling lattice of circles and lines, and pointed downward. The air changed as they descended. Sound itself seemed to warp, bending around corners before it reached them. Izzy tried to speak, but her voice came out muffled, as if swallowed by the air. The deeper they went, the more the world above receded until even their breathing felt unnatural, absorbed by something unseen. Then they saw the first light. A dim orange pulse flickered through a crack in the tunnel wall. When Junie peered closer, she realized it was firelight and beyond it movement, shadows shifting, figures. She froze. "Someone's down here." Izzy grabbed her sleeve. "Junie?" But Junie was already crawling toward the crack, widening it with her fingers until she could peer through. On the other side was a cavern, not vast, but deep, with rough structures built from scavenged stone and metal. Fire burned in oil drums, smoke coiling toward vents in the ceiling. And around those fires sat people. 6 at least. Thin, pale, their faces smudged with dust. One was mending a fishing net. Another stirred something in a pot. They looked human and yet not. Their movements were deliberate, almost ritualistic. More unsettling still was their silence. Not one of them spoke. Even when a child stumbled and fell, the adults reacted only with hand gestures, a language of motion and breath. Junie's throat went dry. "They're alive," she whispered. "They've been living down here." Izzy's face had gone white. "But how? For how long?" A hand touched Junie's shoulder from behind. She spun. A man stood there, thin as a shadow, his face covered in soot, his eyes startlingly clear. He pressed a finger to his lips. "Quiet," he mouthed. Then he gestured for them to follow. The man led them through a gap in the rock into the cavern itself. The silence hit them like a wall. Even their footsteps seemed dampened, swallowed by the air. People turned to stare, men, women, children, all with the same eerie composure. Their eyes followed Junie and Izzy with curiosity, but no alarm. The man guided them to the largest fire, where an older woman sat cross-legged. Her hair was white and cropped short. Scars traced her neck and jaw like pale seams. She signed something with quick, fluid motions. The man replied in gestures Junie couldn't understand. Then the woman spoke aloud, barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't be here." Her voice was brittle from disuse, the sound of paper tearing. Junie swallowed. "We didn't mean to. We thought no one was—" The woman raised a hand. "Speak softly. The air listens." Izzy glanced around, unsettled. The air." The woman nodded once. "The things that live in it." Later, they sat near the fire, steam rising from a metal cup of broth the whisperers had offered. The others watched silently, communicating only with gestures. No one laughed, coughed, or even cleared their throat. The woman introduced herself as Mara. She explained in slow, halting whispers that they'd been here for years. Survivors of the last mining collapse, presumed dead. They'd adapted, learned to live without sound to avoid attracting the listeners. Junie leaned forward. "The creatures?" Mara's eyes gleamed in the firelight. "Not creatures. The old sound, the one beneath all things. When the mining drills broke through, they woke it." Her words carried the weight of memory. Junie thought of the hum that seemed to live inside her bones, the way it responded to her voice. "What does it want?" Mara shook her head. "It doesn't want. It resonates. It seeks harmony through us, through stone, through water. When you make noise, it remembers you." Izzy's hands trembled around the cup. "Then how do you survive?" "We listen," Mara said simply. "We let silence grow inside us. We learn the difference between the world's breath and our own." That night, the girls were given a place to sleep in a small alcove lined with old blankets. Junie couldn't rest. Every few minutes she heard faint vibrations, soft, rhythmic, moving through the rock. Once she sat up and saw a small boy standing at the entrance to the alcove. He was barefoot, his eyes reflecting the dim firelight. He raised a finger to his lips, then pointed toward the tunnel leading deeper into the cavern. Junie whispered, "What is it?" The boy's voice was barely air. "He sings?" "Who?" The boy tilted his head, listening to something only he could hear. "The one who hums." Junie's heart stuttered. "Mixon?" The boy didn't answer. He simply turned and slipped away into the dark. Junie woke Izzy before dawn. The whisperers were still sleeping or meditating. It was hard to tell. The fires had gone low. Junie packed her things in silence, her breath visible in the chill air. "What are you doing?" Izzy hissed. "That boy. He said Mixon's here." "Junie," Izzy grabbed her arm. "We can't just... They said not to make noise." Junie met her gaze. "Then we won't." They slipped into the tunnel beyond the settlement. Guided only by the faint tremor of sound beneath their feet, the passage wound downward, walls narrowing to stone that gleamed faintly with mineral veins. The hum grew stronger, richer a chorus now, layered and alive. Behind them, a whisper chased through the dark Mara's voice, soft but urgent. "Don't go deeper. The sound remembers everything." But Junie didn't stop. She followed the resonance into the dark, toward whatever waited beyond the reach of silence. Chapter 17. The Boy Who Listens. The tunnels narrowed until the air felt like a living thing pressing against their skin. Junie walked first, one hand grazing the wall, following the faint pulse of afterlight that ran like veins through the rock. It throbbed softly beneath her fingertips, a rhythm almost identical to a heartbeat, or to the hum she'd begun hearing in her sleep. Izzy followed close behind, her breathing shallow, her flashlight hooded beneath a strip of dark cloth. Every sound seemed dangerous down here, the scrape of boots, the flutter of cloth, even the swallow of saliva. Noise didn't just echo, it called. Junie whispered, "We're close. I can feel it." Izzy gave her a look that was half fear, half disbelief. "You said that 2 tunnels ago." Junie didn't argue. The hum had changed, she could sense it, even if she couldn't explain how. It was warmer here, tinged with something almost human, like the resonance of a lullaby. The same lullaby their mother used to hum when Mixon couldn't sleep. Every step felt heavier with memory. They reached a chamber where the ceiling vanished into darkness. Water dripped from above, collecting in a wide pool that reflected the faint afterlight in trembling blues and greens. Junie crouched beside it, shining her narrow beam into the water. The reflection looked like stars caught beneath the surface. Something about the sound here was different. It wasn't the deep, subterranean drone of the mines, it was layered, almost patterned, notes weaving into one another like a slow, wordless song. Izzy turned in a slow circle, the light trembling in her hand. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Junie nodded. "It's him." And she meant it. The pattern in the hum wasn't random. It rose and fell in ways she recognized imperfect but familiar, like Mixon's voice when he'd try to match their mother's pitch and always miss by half a note. Her throat closed. "He's here somewhere." They crossed the chamber. A passage opened on the far side, ribbed with broken rebar and the remnants of old support beams. Junie ducked through first and stopped. The corridor beyond was lined with marks, dozens of them carved into the stone, circles intersected with lines repeating fractal. Junie pressed her palm against one. It was shallow but deliberate. Each symbol vibrated faintly as though it remembered the touch that had made it. "Mixon's drawings," Izzy breathed. "Junie, it's the same patterns." Junie traced another with her fingers. "He's been down here. He made these." Izzy hesitated. "Or someone made him make them." The thought chilled Junie more than the air. As they went deeper, the carvings grew denser. Some were overlaid again and again, almost frantic. In the gaps between symbols, strands of the glowing residue afterlight had seeped out, forming thin filaments that hung like cobwebs. The tunnels pulsed softly with it, breathing in time with the hum. They turned a corner and froze. Ahead, a faint orange glow flickered. For a terrible second, Junie thought it was a fire, but it wasn't flame. It was phosphorescence, rising from a wide basin at the tunnel's end. Shapes moved within it. Junie crouched, motioning Izzy to stay back. She crept forward until she could see clearly. There were people. At least 4 of them, huddled around the basin, their skin pale and luminous. Their movements were slow, almost ceremonial. One of them dipped a rag into the glowing fluid and wiped it along the stone, tracing new patterns with trembling hands. None spoke. None looked up. They weren't whisperers. They were something else, their bodies marked with faint blue lines that pulsed in rhythm with the hum. Izzy's whisper was barely air. "What are they doing?" Junie shook her head. "Listening?" They tried to back away quietly, but the smallest slip of gravel betrayed them. The nearest figure turned. Its face caught the light. It was a man, or had been once, but his eyes were colorless, almost opalescent, and where veins should have been, thin channels of afterlight coursed under his skin. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Instead, a low vibration rolled through the floor like thunder. Junie stumbled back. The man tilted his head, listening. Then, slowly, he lifted a hand and pointed past them toward another tunnel. Junie hesitated, then whispered, "He wants us to go that way." "Junie, we can't trust..." But something inside Junie already knew. That hum, that pull, it was stronger from that direction. It wasn't fear guiding her anymore. It was something else, something that vibrated in perfect sympathy with her bones. She followed the man's gesture. The next passage sloped downward, the walls narrowing to slick, resonant stone. The sound here was overwhelming, not loud, but immense, like standing beside a heartbeat the size of a mountain. When they reached the bottom, Junie's flashlight caught movement, small, human-shaped. A child stood in the glow of the afterlight veins. He was barefoot, his clothes torn but recognizable Mixon's old shirt, the one with the faded rocket ship. His eyes shimmered faintly, reflecting blue. "Mixon?" Junie's voice broke the silence before she realized what she'd done. The child blinked, tilting his head. "Junie?" It was his voice, softer, slower, like it came from far away. Junie took a step forward. "It's me. It's really me." He smiled faintly. "You found the song?" Her breath hitched. "You're alive. Thank God you're—" But he shook his head gently. "No, not the same way." Izzy's breath hitched. "Oh my God." Junie crouched, reaching out a trembling hand. "Mixon, what do you mean? What happened to you?" He touched the wall beside him. The afterlight brightened under his palm. "They showed me how to listen. The quiet people down here, they don't hear like you do. They hear through the dark, through the stone. It talks to them, it talks to me." "Mixon," Junie whispered, "you have to come back with us." He frowned slightly as though trying to remember something. "The ones who hum, they're waking up. They don't like when it's loud. They said the loud ones will break everything again." Junie's pulse thudded in her ears. "We can go home, okay? You can tell me all of this there." But Mixon only stepped backward into the dark. "Home is loud," he said softly. "Here, I can hear everything." "Mixon?" He looked up at the ceiling as if listening to something neither of them could hear. Then softly, "They're coming." And before Junie could move, the hum shifted. It rose from the floor and ceiling at once, becoming a vibration so deep it blurred her vision. Izzy clutched her ears, gasping. The light from the walls pulsed faster, frantic. Shapes began to move fluid, boneless, emerging from the cracks in the rock. Junie screamed his name, but the sound was swallowed whole. Mixon's small hand lifted, glowing faintly in the blue haze, and then he was gone. The chamber roared with silence. When Junie woke, she was lying on cold stone. The afterlight had dimmed. Izzy was beside her, pale and trembling. The hum was quieter now, but still alive beneath the surface, like something breathing slowly after feeding. "What happened?" Izzy croaked. Junie's throat was raw. "We found him." "Where is he?" Junie stared into the dark. "He's not gone," she said finally. "He's still down here, listening." Chapter 18. The Chamber of Voices. The tunnels narrowed until the air itself felt solid. Junie led with her palm pressed to the slick wall, fingertips sliding over veins of mineral that pulsed faintly, like something sleeping just beneath the surface. Each step drew a sound from the earth, a whisper, a hum, a long and low resonance that neither echoed nor faded, only folded in on itself like breath through glass. They had followed the markings for hours, those sigils carved by hands they no longer trusted to be human. Izzy trailed close behind, her light dimmed to a thin halo. The silence between them had become its own language, one built from glances, pauses, the small gestures of survival. When the passage opened, it did so without warning. The stone fell away into a vastness that made Junie's stomach pitch. Her first impression was sound not heard, but felt, a trembling through her ribs and teeth. The chamber was alive with vibration. She clicked her flashlight on low, the beam slicing through air that shimmered with fine particles. It looked like dust, but it moved as though listening. "God," Izzy breathed. The word fractured in the air, splintered into faint harmonics that shuddered through the cavern. "Don't," Junie whispered. Her voice came out hoarse, thin. "Don't talk." The chamber was immense, a dome the size of a cathedral. Every wall slick with the same dark resin they'd seen before, though here it gleamed with a pearlescent sheen, like wet skin. But what held Junie transfixed were the shapes. At first she thought they were carvings, reliefs etched into the walls, human silhouettes stretched in agony. But when she stepped closer, she realized they weren't stone. They were people. Or what was left of them? Bodies had fused into the resin, their faces half swallowed, limbs tapering into filaments that glowed faintly like strands of living wire. It was as though the walls had absorbed them, or perhaps grown from them. Izzy gagged, clamping a hand over her mouth. "They're still—" "No," Junie said quickly, though her own voice betrayed her. "They can't be." But the light caught movement, the barest flutter beneath the resin, as if the lungs beneath still strained for breath. A slow, mournful motion, synced to the same subterranean pulse that thrummed through the stone. And then Junie heard it. Her name. At first, it came as a trick of the vibration, a phantom syllable shaped by resonance. But then it came again, threading through the air with the unmistakable cadence of a voice she knew. "Junie." She turned sharply, light swinging across the chamber. The sound was everywhere, not echoing, but emerging from the walls themselves, as though each half-swallowed face was speaking through the same throat. Izzy clutched her arm. "That's not real." Junie's heart was a small, desperate bird. "It's him," she said. "Junie, no." She stepped closer to the wall, pressing her hand against the resin. It was warm. Beneath the surface, a flicker of movement small, like a child's hand, brushing back. "Mixin?" she whispered. The resin pulsed, and a faint melody bled into the air. A lullaby, fractured by distance and distortion, but unmistakable the tune their mother used to hum to them on storm nights. Izzy backed away. "Stop it. It's not him, Junie. You know it's not him." But Junie wasn't listening. She was remembering the way he'd sung that song through a tin can telephone, his little voice trembling through the strings between their rooms. How the sound had meant safety, meant home. The hum grew stronger. It wasn't just in her ears now, it lived inside her bones, threading through her skull like fine wire. Every wall was vibrating in sympathy, everybody fused into it, swaying with the same dreadful rhythm. And then she understood. They weren't merely dead. They were resonant. The creatures hadn't killed them. They'd tuned them. Each body was part of an instrument, a terrible chorus that filled the cavern with low harmonic sound. The closer she listened, the clearer the patterns became, a kind of language woven through frequencies and rhythm. It was communication, not chaos. "Mixin," she murmured again, as if the name itself could part the veil between flesh and sound. Something answered. From the far end of the cavern, a ripple moved across the air, visible, like heat distortion. The dust motes vibrated violently, shifting into spirals. A glow began to form, pale blue and pulsing, like a living heart. Izzy stumbled backward. "Junie, we have to go." The glow grew until it revealed another tunnel mouth, but it wasn't empty. The shape that emerged was tall and too thin, limbs jointed wrong, its head tilted at an unnatural angle as it moved without sound. The creature's skin shimmered faintly, not light, but interference, as though its body bent sound itself. It stopped halfway across the cavern. Junie couldn't move. It was listening. The hum in the walls changed pitch, a dozen human tones rising together, shaping a harmony that enveloped the creature. It lifted its head toward Junie, and the air between them vibrated. For a moment she felt something like understanding pass through her, a sensation rather than a thought. Then it spoke. Not in words, but through vibration. The sound rippled through her skull in waves that formed meaning only when she stopped resisting. "You woke the song?" Junie gasped, stumbling backward. Izzy caught her, eyes wide with terror. "Junie, what is it saying?" She shook her head, clutching her temples. "It's notes inside." "You broke the quiet. You brought the echo back." The creature's skin flickered, its outline distorting. Behind it, the fused bodies began to tremble, their half-open mouths vibrating in unison. The air thickened with pressure. "Mixin," she screamed, no longer caring about the noise. "If you're here, please." The hum fractured, a single high note lancing through the chamber like a blade. The dust fell still. Every face in the wall turned toward her in one synchronized, awful motion. And somewhere deep within that choir of trapped voices, a single one answered her call. "Junie?" Clear, small, heartbreakingly human. She staggered to her knees. I'm here, Mixin." The walls began to pulse with brighter light, waves of afterlight flaring beneath the resin. Izzy grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "He's gone. Junie, it's not him anymore." But Junie saw a tiny handprint glowing beneath the resin, fresh, impossibly fresh, the same small shape she'd followed this far. She pressed her hand against it. The resonance surged. The creature at the edge of the cavern moved again, not toward them, but into the wall. It dissolved into the surface, its form dispersing into luminous veins that traveled through the resin like electricity. The hum changed tone, deepening into something vast and sorrowful. Izzy's flashlight flickered, and darkness swallowed the chamber except for the faint, steady glow of that small handprint. Junie's breath shuddered. "He's alive," she whispered. "He's still in there." But beneath her hand, the wall pulsed once, then again, then stilled as though something inside had just exhaled its final breath. The chamber fell quiet. Truly quiet, for the first time since they'd entered. And in that silence, Junie realized how deaf she had become to anything else, how her own heartbeat now sounded foreign, intrusive. She looked back at Izzy, who stood trembling, tears streaking down the grime on her face. "We need to leave," Izzy said softly. "Whatever this is, it's not for us." Junie didn't answer. She was staring at the wall, at the faint afterglow that lingered in the shape of a child's hand, already fading into the stone. When they turned to go, the hum resumed softer now, but following them like a breath against the back of their necks. And though neither of them spoke again until they reached the next passage, both heard it faint, almost beneath hearing a boy's voice humming a lullaby through the dark. Chapter 19. Resonance. They walked for what felt like hours, though time had no meaning underground. The air was thick with the pulse of unseen machinery, not mechanical, but biological. Every breath they took seemed to vibrate through the stone, and every silence carried an undercurrent like a heartbeat too deep to locate. Junie kept her hand along the tunnel wall, tracing its subtle rhythm. It wasn't the steady beat of a clock, but a breathing pattern, slow and tidal, inhaling and exhaling through the bones of the earth. Izzy limped behind her, one arm pressed to her ribs, the other clutching the map of Mixon's sketches. The paper was torn, smudged with dirt, and damp from their sweat. "Junie," she whispered, "we're too deep. The air's getting worse." "Keep moving," Junie murmured. "We're close. I can feel it." The tunnels had changed no longer the straight, engineered shafts of miners' hands, but organic corridors curved like arteries. Veins of glowing mineral webbed the walls, some faintly blue, some amber, some shifting color like trapped lightning. The deeper they went, the more the stone began to sound. At first, it was subtle, an occasional tremor that could be mistaken for a faraway quake. But soon, as their boots pressed into the damp soil, the sound came in layered tones. Not random, structured. Izzy stopped suddenly, crouching. "Do you hear that?" Junie knelt beside her. They listened. A low hum trembled up from the earth, steady, rhythmic, impossibly precise. Then another tone joined it, higher, weaving against the first. A third followed, resonating perfectly between the two. Together they formed a chord so pure and deep that it vibrated inside their chests. Junie's lips parted. "It's a pattern." Izzy nodded faintly. "Like music, or communication," Junie finished. The hum changed pitch, rising just enough to make the air seem thicker. Dust drifted down from the ceiling, and something shifted in the walls, a subtle, living ripple. Junie leaned closer to one of the glowing veins. The surface was smooth and translucent, like the inside of a seashell. Within it, something moved, not fluid, not entirely solid either, a shimmer that rippled with each tone. Izzy recoiled. "Please, tell me that's not alive." Junie whispered, "It's everything that's alive." They followed the sound until the passage opened into another chamber, smaller than the last, but no less alien. Here the walls were split with thin, horizontal fissures, each one glowing faintly. The fissures vibrated in sequence, sending waves of resonance that rippled outward through the air. Junie stepped into the center, eyes wide. The ground itself shimmered faintly, and she realized she was standing on a thin crust above a deeper void. The sound rose from below, like an ocean under ice. Izzy crouched, placing the map flat on the ground. The markings, mixed in strange spirals and waveforms, began to line up perfectly with the rhythms surrounding them. "It's not just a drawing," she said softly. "It's notation. These are frequencies." He was mapping sound. Junie knelt beside her, tracing the lines with a shaking finger. "If these are frequencies, then this place..." She looked around at the walls, at the glowing veins, at the rhythmic light. "It's not random. It's harmonic." Izzy frowned. "You mean like music?" Junie nodded. "Like the earth is playing a note, a constant tone that everything here responds to: the minerals, the air, maybe even the creatures." They both went silent, letting the sound fill them. The tone vibrated in their bones, sinking to their breath. Junie could feel her pulse aligning with it, her heartbeat slowing, adjusting. "It's alive," she said. "All of it. The mind didn't create this. It broke into it." Izzy looked up, her face pale. "So the miners found a living sound?" "No," Junie whispered. "They found a resonant layer, a part of the earth that's been vibrating like this for maybe forever. A naturally harmonic zone." She remembered the stories, the event that had sealed off Harrow Creek's mines, the tremors, the reports of impossible sounds, the miners who never came back. She imagined their drills biting through stone, cutting into this hidden frequency until the sound itself screamed back. "And something heard." Junie swallowed hard. "We woke them up." Izzy's flashlight dimmed, the beam shivering against the air. "What are they?" Junie's eyes swept the walls again, following the moving shimmer beneath the translucent layers. The shapes were abstract, but sometimes they seemed to almost coalesce, branching filaments, pulsing nodes, faint outlines like ribs or wings. "They're not aliens," Junie said quietly. "They're not from somewhere else. They're from here." The word hung between them like a revelation. Izzy blinked. "From the Earth?" Junie nodded slowly. "An evolutionary echo. Maybe they've always existed not as bodies, but as frequencies. Patterns of vibration that built structure around themselves over time. Sound made flesh." Izzy shivered, "Like coral growing on a reef." "Exactly," Junie murmured. "Only the reef is the Earth's harmonic layer, and we cracked it open." They stood there for a long time, the hum surrounding them like a tide. Izzy traced a trembling line across Mixon's map. If this resonance runs through everything, then the whole town's built on it. Maybe that's why people forget or pretend the sound changes them. Junie's voice trembled. "Then what about Mixon?" Izzy hesitated. Junie continued, voice breaking. "He's not just missing, he's tuned to it. I saw him in the wall, Izzy. I felt his hand." Izzy shook her head. "No, Junie, you saw something that wants you to think it's him. That's not the same thing." But Junie only looked deeper into the glowing fissures. What if it is him? What if he's not gone but changed? What if he's part of this now? The sound shifted again, a soft, descending tone that brushed the edge of sorrow. It felt almost responsive, as if the resonance itself had heard her words and was answering. Izzy whispered, "Don't talk like that." Junie stood, her light sweeping over the chamber. "No, we have to understand it. It's not just noise. It's a system. A network. These creatures, the ones we saw, they're just extensions of this frequency, given form. They move like sound waves do. They react to vibration, to pattern. We're inside their world." The idea was too vast, too strange, but once she said it, it felt inevitable. Izzy folded her arms tightly. "So, what are we supposed to do? We can't fight sound." Junie looked down at Mixon's map again. "We can resonate back. He knew something about this. His drawings, the symbols. Maybe he was already hearing it." Izzy gave a small, helpless laugh. "So, what, we're going to talk to them? Sing to the monsters?" Junie didn't answer. She was staring into the darkness where the tones were thickest, listening to the pattern beneath pattern. It wasn't just hums and tremors. There were voices hidden there, faint, interwoven harmonies. And one of them sounded like her brother. "Mixon," she whispered. The sound swelled, blooming through the chamber like a breath drawn in after a long sleep. The floor trembled beneath them. Izzy grabbed her arm. "Junie, stop. You're making it worse." But Junie's expression had gone distant, almost entranced. "It's not worse. It's listening." From somewhere deep below, a rumble rolled upward, not anger, but recognition. The tones aligned, harmonics colliding until the air shimmered like heat. Junie felt her body tremble with the pitch, her heartbeat sinking again, her pulse dissolving into the rhythm. "Mixin'," she said again, louder now. And then she heard him, not in words, but through the vibration. The resonance itself shaped into something familiar, a pattern that felt like his voice. It wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't even sound. It was memory given frequency. Junie gasped and stumbled back. "He's alive! Izzy, he's alive down here!" Izzy shook her head fiercely. "You don't know that! You can't!" But Junie didn't seem to hear her anymore. She looked at the walls, the glowing veins, the breathing stone, and something in her expression hardened. "If he's part of this," she whispered, "then we have to reach him through it." Izzy's face twisted in fear. "Through the resonance? Junie, you'll lose yourself." Junie turned toward the far tunnel, a narrow split where the hum was strongest, rising in pitch like a beckoning. "If he's tuned to it, then so am I." "Junie," but she was already moving, one hand brushing the wall, letting the vibration guide her. Each step matched the pulse beneath her feet. It felt like following a heartbeat home. Behind her, Izzy cursed under her breath and followed. The passage sloped downward, the glow brightening until the stone gave way to something else. A membrane of translucent mineral, pulsing faintly with inner light. The hum became a harmony of many tones, layered and alive. Junie stopped. "This is it. This is where they came through." Izzy swallowed hard. "What's on the other side?" Junie touched the membrane. It rippled outward, luminous rings spreading like ripples in water. The source! For a moment, both girls stood in silence, bathed in the soft glow. The hum sank deeper, vibrating through their blood. Izzy's voice was small. "Junie, if this resonance is alive, then it's not evil. It's just what happens when we dig too deep." Junie's eyes didn't leave the light. "Then maybe we have to go deeper still." The hum pulsed in answer, low and terrible and strangely beautiful. And from the other side of the glowing barrier, a faint shape began to form, tall, spindly, its body vibrating like a reflection in water. Behind it, something vast moved, a shadow without edges, as if the chamber beyond had no end. Junie's breath caught. "We found it," Izzy whispered. "What?" Junie's voice trembled. "The core, the resonance itself." The creature moved closer, its outline shimmering into focus. It didn't look hostile. It looked expectant. Junie pressed her palm to the barrier. The vibration spread through her body until her heart beat in perfect sync with the sound. "Mixin'," she said again, not as a plea this time, but as a frequency, as part of the rhythm. The creature tilted its head, the hum shifting in tone, almost an answer. And through the barrier came a second, fainter pulse, a smaller pattern, perfectly familiar. A child's heartbeat. Junie's eyes filled with tears. "He's still part of it." Izzy whispered, "Junie, we should go." But Junie stayed, her fingers trembling against the membrane. "No, not until I know if he can come back." The light grew brighter, the resonance deeper. The entire tunnel began to shake. The hum no longer sounded like sound at all. It was thought, emotion, history, a song the earth had been singing since before language. Junie turned to Izzy, eyes glistening. "We didn't wake monsters," she said. "We woke the planet." And then the membrane pulsed again, the sound climbing toward a frequency that was neither natural nor human. Beyond it, the shadow moved massive, slow, deliberate. Something was waiting for them. Something ancient. And when the pulse finally stabilized, Junie felt the message bloom inside her head. Come deeper. Chapter 20. The Mother of the Dark. They followed the hum deeper than they'd ever gone. The air thickened as they descended, not just with moisture or heat, but with something dense and vibrating, like the unseen weight of a storm pressing down. Junie felt it in her teeth first, a dull tingle along her molars that made her jaw ache. Izzy's flashlight beam jittered across the walls, and even the dust seemed to shimmer in rhythm with the sound. They had entered a place beyond air, a space tuned to something alive. The tunnels widened gradually, the rough rock giving way to surfaces that shimmered like black glass. Veins of bioluminescence ran through them, thin, wavering lines of green-blue light that pulsed with the same cadence as a heartbeat. Sometimes the glow throbbed slow and heavy, sometimes quick and shivering. Junie began to recognize the rhythm. It was the same pulse she'd heard in Mixon's voice, the same undercurrent that had haunted Harrow Creek since the event. They reached a split in the tunnel. Izzy crouched near the fork, running her hand along the left wall, tracing faint impressions like ripples in still water. "It's responding," she whispered. "When we move, it changes." Junie tilted her head. "The sound?" Izzy shook her head. "The walls, they're listening." Something about that thought made Junie's skin tighten. She remembered her father's old saying, "The mountain keeps what it takes." Maybe this was what he'd meant. They took the right-hand tunnel, following the direction of the deeper vibrations. The air began to taste metallic, sharp as static. Far below, the sound grew into a vast, murmuring current, as if hundreds of voices were speaking beneath the earth, their words folding over one another until they were nothing but tone. The ground sloped downward into a natural amphitheater carved from the stone. The walls curved outward and upward, soaring into a vaulted ceiling lost in shadow. A dark pool lay at its center, perfectly still, reflecting the thin veins of light that webbed across the chamber. Junie and Izzy stood at the edge, flashlights trembling in their hands. "What is this place?" Junie whispered. Izzy exhaled shakily. "I think this is where it began." As if summoned by her words, the pool rippled. Not outward inward, toward a center that had no bottom. The motion spread to the walls, and the bioluminescent veins flared, brightening in a single synchronized pulse. The sound swelled, layered, and deep, filling the space with pressure. It wasn't loud, not yet, but it carried weight, like the presence of something enormous turning its attention toward them. Then came the shapes. They emerged from the walls slowly, half-formed, caught between mineral and flesh. Figures. Dozens of them human outlines warped and blended into the stone. Some reached outward as if clawing for escape. Others appeared to have sunk willingly, their faces serene, mouths open in eternal exhalation. Their features had softened into the rock, eyes like glassy hollows that still glimmered faintly with reflected light. Junie couldn't breathe. "Those are," Izzy started, voice breaking. "The Taken," Junie finished. "The ones who vanished." The sound intensified, threading through her ribs, her spine. It wasn't a hum anymore. It was language beyond words, a resonance that bypassed meaning and went straight into her bones. She heard Mixon. Not a memory, not an echo, his voice calling from inside the sound itself. "Junie!" She spun around, searching the chamber, the walls, the faces. "Mixon?" But the voice came from everywhere. From the air, from the water, from the pulse beneath her feet. "I'm here," it said, soft and distant, as if submerged. "Don't be afraid." Junie stumbled toward the pool, the edge trembling under her boots. "Where are you?" Izzy reached for her arm, panic rising. "Junie, wait." But Junie knelt beside the water, staring into its mirrored surface. Beneath the reflection of her own face, she saw another blurred, shifting eyes opening in the dark. Mixon. He was there, beneath the surface, surrounded by that same dim glow, his body suspended as if the water were holding him upright. His mouth moved soundlessly, and then the chamber shuddered. A low tone rolled through the cavern, not quite a roar, not quite a voice. It vibrated the rock, rippled the pool, made the bioluminescent veins flicker in distress. Izzy staggered back, covering her ears. "It's changing again? Junie, the frequency—" Junie barely heard her. She watched as the pool began to swell, waves folding inward like lungs filling too full. Then the center broke open. From the depths, something massive rose, not fast but inevitable. The sound became thunder inside her skull. The water parted around a structure too large to fully comprehend. A mound of pulsating black flesh and stone fused together, breathing through vents that opened and closed like gills. Bioluminescent tendrils snaked outward, climbing the walls, plugging into the half-human figures embedded there. It was alive. And the figures, the remnants of the lost, were part of it. Junie couldn't move. The thing towered over the chamber, its form continually shifting, sometimes a mass of interlocking ridges, sometimes almost humanoid, like a colossal body curled within itself. From within its folds, hundreds of eyes blinked open, glowing with the same eerie blue as the veins in the walls. The Mother of the Dark had awoken. The sound it emitted wasn't heard so much as felt. It went through her, scattering thought, replacing fear with awe so profound it verged on paralysis. It spoke without words, a vibration that rearranged the air. "You broke the silence." Junie gasped, clutching her chest. She didn't know if she'd truly heard it, or if the meaning had simply been placed inside her head. Izzy fell to her knees, her flashlight tumbling into the water. "Junie?" she whispered, trembling. "It's in my head?" Junie stared up at the towering form, feeling her mind bend around its presence. "What are you?" The reply came like a wave through the cavern. "Resonance, memory, hunger. You opened the layer that dreamt beneath the stone." The words weren't sounds. They were felt as pulses, each one shaking her vision apart for an instant. "Mixon!" Junie shouted into the roar. "Where is he? What did you do to him?" The great body stirred. A deep fissure in its surface split open, revealing a core of glowing tissue that pulsed with human silhouettes, hundreds, maybe thousands suspended within, their forms rippling like light through water. And among them, she saw him. Mixon. He floated near the surface of that core, his skin faintly luminous, eyes open but unfocused. He wasn't screaming. He wasn't even afraid. He looked at peace, as though he'd become part of the pulse itself. Junie's throat closed. "He's alive." "He is voice now," the mother intoned. "One of many. You hear him because he listens back." Izzy stood again, wiping tears and sweat from her face. "This isn't right. It's parasitic. It's feeding off them." "We feed to survive. We echo to endure," the voice replied, rumbling through their bones. "Your kind tore the first seam," the machine sang. "We woke." Junie's breath caught. "The mining operation." Izzy's eyes widened. "The generator." "You split the harmonic crust," said the mother. "We were dream and silence. You made us sound." The chamber trembled again, and a series of cracks spidered through the ceiling. Dust fell like slow rain. Mixon's voice surfaced faintly through the hum. "Junie?" She turned toward the fissure, desperate. "Can you hear me?" "Yes," came the answer, not from his mouth, but through the vibrations themselves. His tone was layered, doubled, like two versions of him speaking in tandem. "It's all connected. I can feel them." Junie's heart clenched. "We can get you out." He shook his head, his movement slow and dreamlike. "I don't think you can. I'm not separate anymore." The mother's glow pulsed, and her words rolled through the space again. "To break the resonance is to end the voice. The network binds us. Destroy it, and your kind will silence the dream forever." Junie felt the meaning beneath the sound, a warning, a plea, and something else, something mournful. Izzy was pacing near the edge, eyes wild. "It's lying. It's manipulating you. This thing killed them." "We absorbed what you abandoned." "Abandoned?" Izzy spat. "We didn't." "You tore open the seam and left your sound to rot." The chamber shook violently and the water churned. The half-human forms in the walls began to twitch, their mouths opening, releasing small harmonic tones that filled the air like a choir. Junie covered her ears, but it didn't help. The sound came from inside her now. Images flashed behind her eyes. Visions of the past. Miners at work, drills whirring, the hum beneath the ground growing until it split open. Men screaming as light and sound swallowed them. The first collapse. The event. And through it all, the same low tone, pulsing like a heartbeat too large for the world. When Junie opened her eyes again, she was on her knees, gasping. Izzy crouched beside her, shaking her shoulder. Hey, stay with me." Junie blinked, a vision swimming. "I saw it. The machine. The mining site. It tore through a layer like breaking the skin of a drum." Izzy nodded, pale. "Then it's true. They're not from somewhere else. They were here all along." Junie looked up at the vast, pulsing form of the mother. "She's the center, the origin of all of it." "We are the song beneath your world," the voice murmured, "and you are our dissonance." Junie stared at Mixon's form inside the glowing core. "If we stop it," she whispered, "we stop him too." Izzy's jaw tightened. "Then we find another way." The mother's eyes, hundreds of them, turned downward, focusing on the two small shapes standing before her. The tone shifted, low and almost sorrowful. "The silence comes whether you wish it or not," she said. "The sound must resolve." A deep rumble passed through the ground, and one of the tunnels behind them began to collapse. Dust poured down in sheets. Junie reached for Izzy's hand. "We have to go." But as they backed away, Junie glanced once more toward the glowing core toward Mixon. His eyes met hers through the shimmer, and for just a second, his expression flickered, something human breaking through the calm. "Junie," he whispered again, "don't let it end like this." Then the chamber roared, drowning his words in pure resonance. The mother of the dark sank slowly back into the pool, her vast body folding into shadow. The water sealed over her with a hiss like breath drawn in reverse. The lights in the walls dimmed. The hum dropped to a trembling murmur. The cavern for the first time seemed to wait. Junie stood trembling at the edge of the dark pool, her reflection rippling beneath her feet. The sound beneath her heart would not stop. It was Mixon. It was the earth. It was everything that remembered what the world had broken. Chapter 21. The Device. The path out of the chamber of voices twisted upward through half-collapsed tunnels. Every sound, the crunch of rock beneath their boots, their breathing, even the faint rustle of fabric echoed too long, as if the cavern itself were unwilling to let go of what it heard. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence felt fragile, thin as glass, like even a whisper might call the thing below back up from its sleep. Junie's hands still trembled. Her mind throbbed with after-images, Mixon's eyes behind that shimmering barrier, the way his voice had sounded through the resonance, both his and not his. She could still feel it in her ribs, vibrating in time with her pulse. Izzy led the way, her flashlight beam darting from wall to wall. The glow from the bioluminescent veins was dimmer now, receding like the tide. The air had cooled, though every so often a warm draft brushed past them, carrying the faintest whisper of that low, impossible hum. They reached a narrow shaft that sloped upward, carved partly by hand, partly by something else jagged, melted edges where metal and rock had fused together. The floor was slick, the air sharp with the scent of burnt copper and ozone. Izzy crouched near the entrance and ran her hand along a chunk of stone that shimmered faintly with embedded metal shards. "This is old," she murmured. "Older than the chamber, maybe, but this—" She brushed away some dust. "This was man-made." Junie knelt beside her. "From the mining days?" Izzy nodded, her expression tightening. "From the event?" They descended again, following the tunnel as it widened into a carved corridor supported by rusted beams. Broken cables dangled like vines, some still humming faintly when touched. The deeper they went, the more the rock gave way to remnants of machinery. Twisted piping, cracked panels, fragments of old gauges. And then they saw it. The tunnel opened into a cavernous chamber, half natural, half constructed, a place where the miners had once dug deep to extract the ore veins that ran beneath Harrow Creek, but now the walls were streaked with black residue, and the air had that same burnt metal tang. At the center of the space, surrounded by fallen scaffolding and warped floor plating, stood the remains of a massive machine. It was shaped like a ring, or the suggestion of one, broken and half buried in debris. Segments of metal rose from the ground like ribs, each one threaded with ancient cables and copper tubing. In the center, where the ring met the floor, a huge cylindrical core sat embedded in stone, its surface etched with strange patterns of corrosion and faint fading light. Izzy's breath caught. Oh my God. Junie stepped closer, brushing dust from a shattered control panel. Rows of levers and buttons sat fused into melted glass. "Is this what made the resonance?" Izzy nodded slowly. "The harmonic generator, the one the miners built to amplify the ore's vibrational output. They thought they could use sound waves to break apart the rock instead of blasting it." Junie stared at the twisted mass. "But they didn't just break the rock. They broke something else," Izzy said quietly. The two of them stood in silence for a moment, listening to the faint residual hum that still lived inside the machine. It wasn't mechanical anymore. It was organic, like a breath moving through a lung that refused to die. Izzy moved around the edge, crouching to examine the base. She brushed away ash, revealing a small plate stamped with worn lettering. Harmonic Resonance Field Generator Model 7, Atheron Mining Company. Beneath it, in faint red marker, someone had scrawled a warning. Do not reactivate the Earth remembers. Junie exhaled, her voice barely a whisper. They knew. Some of them did, Izzy said, eyes scanning the panel. After the collapse, a few survivors wrote about a sound that had breathed. They thought it was a hallucination, gas leaks, stress fractures, but this, she gestured at the generator. This machine was still running when the mine fell. It didn't just wake something up. It tuned to it. Junie crouched beside her, tracing the edges of the ring. Can it still work? Izzy hesitated. Maybe. The power cells are dead, but... She pointed toward a thick bundle of cables running deeper into the rock. That leads into the harmonic layer itself, the resonance network. You mean into her? Junie said softly. Izzy's jaw tightened. Yeah, the mother. Junie's flashlight flickered as they explored the base of the machine. Rusted stairs led down to a pit, where several old generator coils lay scattered. The air was damp, heavy with the smell of mineral dust and oil long since turned to tar. Izzy wiped her hands on her jeans and pulled a small diagnostic scanner from her pack. If we can map the residual energy, maybe we can find a way to invert it to use the same frequency against itself. Junie frowned. You think that would stop it? I think it would collapse the network, Izzy said, eyes focused on the readings. If the resonance is like a web of sound, we can overload the feedback until it folds in on itself. That's what the generator was built for, amplification. But if we reverse the polarity, she looked up, it becomes cancellation. Junie stared at her. You mean silence? Izzy nodded. Perfect silence. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The thought of ending the sound that had haunted their lives, the hum that had reshaped their world, felt too large to hold. Junie rubbed her arms. And Mixon? Izzy hesitated. That thing said he's part of it now. Junie went on, her voice trembling. If we destroy the resonance... Izzy looked away. Then we destroy whatever's connected to it, including him. The words hung in the air like dust. Junie turned toward the machine again, staring at its cracked, ancient body. There has to be another way. Izzy knelt by the central console, brushing away a thick layer of grime. There might not be. Look at this. The whole system is still partially active. The resonance runs through it like a nervous system. If we don't stop it, it'll spread. The harmonic crust will keep expanding, and Harrow Creek won't just hum anymore. It'll sing? Junie closed her eyes, trying not to imagine what that meant. The hum was already faintly audible now, rising again from the floor, vibrating the soles of their boots. The light inside the machine pulsed once, dim but steady, like a heartbeat reawakening. Izzy's scanner began to beep erratically. It's recharging itself. The resonance is flowing back in. Then turn it off, Junie said. I'm trying. Izzy moved to another panel, wrenching open a rusted hatch. Inside, the wiring was fused into organic material strands of fibrous tissue laced with metal. She recoiled. Jesus, it's merged. It's grown into the system. Junie knelt beside her. The cables throbbed faintly, alive. It's part of her now. Izzy's face was pale, but her voice stayed steady. Then we have to cut her off from it. How? We invert the signal. Create anti-resonance. Junie frowned. You're saying we make it sing the wrong note. Izzy gave a grim smile. Exactly. She began unpacking tools, small voltage adapters, broken batteries, salvaged power converters. The way she moved reminded Junie of the girl she used to be, the one who built radios from scrap metal in her father's garage, who could coax electricity from nothing. Junie helped where she could, holding the light, stripping wires, listening to the slow, awful hum that grew louder the deeper they worked. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time in that place seemed elastic, stretched by the sound that wound through everything. The air trembled with low frequency, like the earth itself was inhaling. Finally, Izzy sat back, wiping sweat and dust from her forehead. There, the core is linked to the harmonic cables. If I reroute the converter through the inverter coil, I can flip the waveform. Junie stared at the glowing circuit. And when you do, the resonance collapses. Junie swallowed. And Mixon? Izzy looked down. He collapses too. The silence that followed was unbearable. Junie stood slowly, walking toward the broken ring. Her flashlight beam moved over the corroded metal, catching in the reflection of the shallow pool that had formed beneath it. The water shimmered faintly with that same pale blue light. She could hear him again faintly through the hum. Junie? It was softer this time, as though carried on a current of air. She turned sharply. Izzy, he's here. Izzy looked up, alarmed. What? I can hear him. Junie's voice broke. He's saying my name. She stepped closer to the machine, hand trembling as she reached out to touch one of the glowing cables. The hum swelled immediately, vibrating through her bones. A rush of warmth flooded her chest, not painful, just overwhelming. And then she saw him. Not with her eyes, but with the sound itself. Mixon, standing somewhere within that vast, resonant network, his body half transparent, outlined by threads of blue light. He wasn't lost, not entirely. He was part of something greater, but there was still a flicker of him there. Don't, he said, his voice echoing inside her head. If you silence it, I go with it. Tears burned in her eyes. Then what are we supposed to do? His expression softened. Listen. The vision wavered, then faded. The sound dropped back into a low, steady thrum. Junie stepped back, gasping. He's still alive. Inside it. Izzy watched her, torn between awe and disbelief. Junie, whatever that thing is, it's not Mixon anymore. The resonance is using his voice. I know what I heard, Junie said, her voice shaking but sure. He's part of it, but he's fighting it. I felt him. Izzy closed her eyes, exhaling hard. Then we're running out of time. The network's growing again. If we don't act soon, there won't be a Harrow Creek left to save. Junie turned toward her. If we use that machine, we kill him. But if we don't, he dies anyway, Izzy said quietly, along with everyone else. The weight of the truth pressed down like the earth itself. Junie looked once more at the broken generator, its ribs glowing faintly, the hum deepening, rising toward something close to song. The machine was alive again. The resonance was waking. She took a slow breath, her voice trembling. Then maybe the only way to end this is to find the note that connects us, not the one that breaks us. Izzy frowned. What do you mean? Mixon said to listen. Izzy stared at her, and for a moment something like hope flickered through the exhaustion. All right, she said softly, then we'll listen. But if that fails... She looked toward the machine, toward the cables that pulsed like veins. Then we make it silent. The hum deepened again, rippling through the ground. Somewhere in the distance, beneath their feet, the mother stirred. The resonance was gathering itself. The earth was readying to sing. And Junie, standing beside the old machine that had started it all, knew that the next sound they made could decide whether the world survived or fell quiet forever. Chapter 22. The Broken Frequency. The hum had softened overnight. Not vanished, never that, but dulled, like a storm withdrawing into itself, still muttering somewhere deep. The cavern's air felt thick, heavy with dust and a kind of exhausted grief. Junie sat cross-legged beside the broken console, her hands still trembling from where she'd pried open the machine's panels. Cables snaked across the stone floor, pulsing faintly with blue light, like veins under skin. Izzy was still tinkering with the generator, headlamp flickering, her voice low and rasped from lack of sleep. It's possible, Izzy said, wiping her sleeve across her mouth. The frequency inversion, it could collapse the resonance field, at least in theory. Junie nodded absently, but her eyes weren't on the machine. They were on Mixon. He sat against the far wall, motionless, half shrouded in the bioluminescent spill of the cavern. His chest rose and fell, but faintly, as if the air itself had to remind him how to breathe. The tendrils of the resonance had receded from his skin since they'd brought him here, The glowing threads that had crawled beneath his veins now dimmed to dull, silver traces. Still, when Junie looked too long, she swore she could see the light inside him shift with the rhythm of the hum. "He's still connected," Junie said. Izzy paused, her wrench halfway through a turn. "Yeah, I know." Neither spoke for a long while. The silence between them wasn't true silence. It never was, not down here. The earth still whispered, a low, endless vibration that carried through the soles of their boots, the ribs in their chests. Junie leaned closer to Mixon, brushing his hair off his forehead. "You hear me?" she whispered. His eyelids fluttered, but no words came. Izzy crouched beside her, scanning the readout on her tablet. "If we invert the frequency, it should collapse the harmonic field. Everything that's resonating with it will destabilize?" Junie frowned. "Everything?" "Yeah," Izzy said. "That includes him." The words hit like a pulse of static. Junie's chest tightened. "There's no guarantee it'll kill him," Izzy added quickly. "But the resonance isn't just inside the walls, it's inside him. He's part of it now." Junie rose to her feet, pacing. "There has to be another way." "There isn't." Izzy stood too, meeting her eyes. "We either end it, or it keeps spreading. You saw what it did to those people in the chamber, how they were turning into conduits. It's only a matter of time before it reaches the surface again." Junie pressed her palms against her temples. The low droning sound seemed to swell as they spoke, echoing through the hollow spaces of the cavern. "He's my brother, Izzy." "I know," Izzy said softly. "That's why I'm not touching the switch until you say so." Junie looked back toward Mixon, whose lips moved faintly, whispering to no one. A tone bled into the air, not the cavern's hum, but something higher, sharper, almost melodic. Izzy froze. "You hear that?" Junie nodded. Mixon was humming. Not the same fractured alien vibration as before. This one was gentle, human, fragile, the echo of something old and small and impossibly familiar. Junie sank to her knees beside him, tears rising before she even understood why. It was their childhood song, the one they'd made up on the hill behind their house, when the world had still been soft and small. Hollow bones and hollow trees. Sing for what the dark can't see. The words came back to her like breath returning after drowning. She had thought she'd forgotten them. "Mixon," she whispered, "can you hear me?" He didn't open his eyes, but his voice, that small broken hum, kept threading through the cavern, and as it did, the walls began to shimmer faintly. The resonance shifted in tone. Izzy backed away, eyes wide. "Junie, the levels are changing." Junie ignored her. She closed her eyes, placed a hand over Mixon's heart, and began to hum with him. At first, her voice was too thin to be heard against the cavern's body-deep vibration, but she kept going, the old melody returning, shaky and imperfect, then gathering strength. Her voice and Mixon's met in the air, intertwining like strands of light. The hum responded. It rose, not in anger, but in recognition. The sound rippled through the stone like water disturbed by a touch. The bioluminescent growths along the walls brightened, then dimmed, their rhythm syncing with the sibling song. Izzy's tablet flickered, reading spiking, then flattening into perfect equilibrium. It's stabilizing," she murmured. "You're communicating with it?" Junie barely heard. She felt the resonance in her bones, not painful now, but immense, like the earth itself was breathing in time with her. The shapes embedded in the walls, the half-formed figures of those taken, began to move faintly, not writhing, but swaying, as though soothed. Junie kept singing. The melody wove through the air, soft as a thread of smoke, fragile as light on water. Her voice cracked once, twice, but she didn't stop. Mixon's breathing steadied. The faint glow beneath his skin pulsed in rhythm with the song. Then, from deeper in the cavern beneath the stone, beneath everything came another voice. Low, ancient, a harmonic echo that layered beneath their own. The mother. Her resonance wasn't words, not truly, but Junie understood her all the same. It wasn't language, it was meaning vibrating through marrow. "You woke us." Junie's heart stuttered. The resonance rippled again, and Mixon's head turned toward her. His eyes opened, not fully human, their irises rimmed in pale light. "Don't stop," Izzy said hoarsely. Junie's voice trembled, but she sang on. The cavern filled with that fragile, mingled song, human and not, despair and hope in equal measure. For the first time since descending into the mines, Junie felt the darkness listen. The humming creatures, the shapes in the stone, the glowing filaments all seemed to lean toward her, trembling in place, awaiting something. Junie's final note faltered, then fell into silence. The hum ceased, completely. It was the first true silence Harrow Creek had heard in years. Izzy lowered the wrench in her hand, tears shining in her eyes. "You did it," she whispered. Junie didn't answer. Her gaze stayed on Mixon. He blinked, slow and human, breathing shallow but steady. For a moment, just one, he looked like himself again. Then the faintest vibration began underfoot. Izzy's tablet flared red. "It's coming back online. The frequency's destabilizing." The cavern lights flared, walls trembling. Mixon's hand clutched Junie's wrist, his grip fierce. "Don't," he rasped. His voice was hoarse, not quite his own. "Don't let it end like this." Junie's tears spilled freely now. "Mixon," he shook his head weakly. "If it breaks, it'll take everything. You have to—" The floor convulsed. A booming sound rolled through the depths. Izzy shouted over the roar, "We have to finish it! The machine's ready!" Junie hesitated. Her mind split clean in two. She looked between the console and her brother, between the last piece of family she had left, and the trembling, wounded world she'd promised to protect, as her throat burned with the echo of their song. Mixon met her eyes. His lips moved, barely audible. "You already saved me." And then the hum surged again, louder, deeper, older. Junie staggered back, her heart breaking open. She screamed not in words, but in sound, raw and primal, her voice cutting through the resonance like a blade. The cavern responded, flickering, stuttering, 1,000 unseen hearts pulsing at once. The light flickered. Izzy's hand hovered over the control. "Junie," she cried. "Say it. Say what you want me to do." Junie looked at her brother, at the faint, steady pulse beneath his ribs, and made her choice. Chapter 23. Collapse. Junie's breath hitched in her chest. The world trembled around her, light, dust, and sound folding together until she couldn't tell where one ended and the next began. Izzy stood at the console, eyes wide, one hand hovering above the final lever. Junie's voice broke through the chaos, raw and shaking. "Do it!" The word tore out of her, and with it came the last of her hesitation. Izzy slammed the lever down. The world screamed. The resonance machine convulsed, its panels bursting with lights so blinding it painted the air white. A deep, bone-vibrating tone poured through the cavern, lower than hearing, more felt than heard. The walls flexed inward as if breathing in, then exhaled with a thunderous crack. Junie staggered back, covering her ears, but it didn't matter. The sound wasn't in the air anymore. It was inside her skull, crawling through her blood, pulsing in the space behind her eyes. The hum had turned on itself. Every harmonic wave the machine inverted collided with the original frequency, collapsing the resonance field like glass under pressure. The once fluid walls began to fracture, the bioluminescent threads flaring, twisting, and then shattering into blinding sparks of sound. Izzy clung to the console as readings spiked wildly, her voice a faint blur against the deafening roar. "It's working! It's collapsing!" Mixon convulsed on the ground, light bursting from beneath his skin. Junie dropped beside him. "Hold on!" she shouted, though she wasn't sure if he could even hear her, if anyone could hear anything over the breaking of the world. Mixon's hand grasped hers, the skin burning hot. "Junie?" His voice was a hum more than speech now, resonant and trembling. "It's okay." "No," she choked. "You're not leaving me again?" But even as she spoke, she could see the resonance unraveling within him. The faint silver lines beneath his skin flared once, twice, then began to dissolve into the air around them. The cavern's walls split open in jagged lines. Through the fractures, light poured, not sunlight, not firelight, but pure frequency turned visible. The essence of sound stripped bare. It moved like liquid, rippling and shimmering, painting everything in gold and violet and impossible blue. The creatures emerged from the fissures, or maybe they became the fissures' shapes of light and motion, half solid, half echo, They shrieked without mouths, their forms dissolving into ribbons as the inverted wave tore through them. Junie held Mixon tighter, her voice lost to the chaos. Izzy stumbled toward them, shielding her eyes. "We have to move, now!" Junie blinked through tears, her ears ringing so loud it felt like silence. She looked at Mixon at the faint smile ghosting across his lips, at the way his eyes flickered between the boy he'd been and something else, entirely. He was fading. "Mixon," she whispered, pressing her forehead to his. "Come back with me." His voice brushed against her ear, barely a vibration. Already did. The cavern gave a final, shuddering breath. The machine shrieked a sound so high it broke through everything, and then it all came apart. A wall of light exploded outward, swallowing stone and shadow and flesh alike. Izzy grabbed Junie by the shoulders and pulled. The two of them stumbled through the collapsing chamber, ducking falling slabs of rock, the resonance tearing reality apart behind them. "Move!" Izzy screamed. The tunnels they'd come through were no longer tunnels. They warped and shifted, stone pulsing like muscle, air shimmering with sound. Junie could barely see, barely breathe. All she could do was follow Izzy's movement ahead, the faint flicker of her headlamp weaving through the storm of light. Behind them, Mixon's voice rose one last time, not in pain, not in fear, but in song. That same melody. Their childhood song. Hollow bones and hollow trees. Junie turned back, tears streaking her face. Through the chaos, she saw him standing where the machine had been, the light pouring through him, his form outlined in 1,000 threads of silver. He wasn't burning. He was becoming. Izzy's voice broke. "Junie?" The tunnel collapsed between them, cutting off the sight, the sound, everything. Junie screamed his name, but it vanished in the roar. They ran. Or maybe they fell, pulled forward by gravity and instinct and something desperate inside them that refused to die. Rocks rained down in bursts. The walls flickered in and out of solidity, one moment stone, the next trembling with translucent light. Every breath Junie took tasted like ozone and ash. Her skin tingled, every nerve alive with the aftershock of sound. Izzy led the way through a collapsing arch, the beam of her light bouncing wildly. "This way!" Junie followed blindly, clutching her chest, the hum still echoing through her bones. It wasn't gone? Not yet. Behind them, the cavern gave a sound like the world cracking open. A pressure wave blasted through the tunnels, throwing them both forward. Junie hit the ground hard, sliding across wet stone. Dust filled her lungs. When she opened her eyes, light spilled through a jagged crack ahead, faint and trembling but real. "Go!" Izzy gasped, pulling her up. They crawled toward it, every movement a battle against the trembling ground. The light grew brighter, clearer, pale gold instead of the deep, haunting glow that had filled the depths. Air. Cold and sharp. Junie broke through first, pulling herself out of the earth like something reborn. She tumbled onto damp soil and collapsed, coughing, choking on sunlight. Sunlight. The first she'd seen in what felt like years. Izzy emerged beside her, covered in dust and blood, her chest heaving. Together, they rolled onto their backs, gasping under a sky that blazed with dawn. For a long time, neither spoke. The only sound was the faint, distant rumble of the earth, settling the minds caving in on themselves, sealing the darkness below. Finally, Izzy turned her head, voice hoarse. "We did it." Junie nodded weakly, tears slipping sideways down her cheeks. "Yeah." But her gaze drifted back toward the collapsed opening, a jagged wound in the ground. Still exhaling faint wisps of vapor, she listened. No hum, no vibration, just wind. The silence felt wrong, too complete. Junie sat up, her heart pounding. "Mixon?" she whispered. Izzy pushed herself up beside her, wincing. "Junie?" "He was right there," Junie said, voice shaking. "He washed—" She broke off, pressing a hand to her mouth. The world was quiet, too quiet. Then, faintly, impossibly faint, came a sound. Not from the air, from below. A single tone. Soft, familiar. A hum. Junie froze. The same note Mixon used to hum when he drew, when the wind brushed through the trees, when he thought she wasn't listening. Her lips trembled. He's still there. Izzy looked down at the sealed ground, her face pale. Or what's left of him? Junie shook her head. No, he's there. He's still... The hum faded. She stared at the ground until her vision blurred, the tears finally spilling over. Izzy placed a hand on her shoulder. Come on, Izzy said softly. We have to go. Junie nodded, though her body didn't move. She stayed there one heartbeat longer, her fingers pressed into the soil as if she could feel the rhythm beneath it. The hum was gone, but she could still feel it, a ghost note lingering in her bones. When she finally stood, the horizon had shifted from pale gold to full daylight. The fields shimmered in the distance. Harrow Creek lay below, its rooftops glinting under the newborn sun. Izzy steadied her, one arm around her shoulders. Together, they began the long walk back down. Behind them, the mines breathed their last. The sound that had haunted the town for years, that had swallowed so many lives, died into silence. But as Junie looked once more toward the broken earth, she thought she saw it flicker, just for a moment, a pulse of faint blue light. And beneath the hush of morning, something deep in the ground exhaled. Not a hum, not quite. A heartbeat. Chapter 24. Dawn. Junie woke to the sound of wind. Not the whispering kind that used to snake through cracks in the walls at night, but a true morning wind, open, wild, clean. It moved through the grass in soft waves, carrying the smell of earth, of dew, of life. For a moment she didn't know where she was. Her cheek was pressed against damp soil, her fingers curled in the crushed stalks of wildflowers. Light warmed her face gentle, not blinding, like the world itself was afraid to startle her awake. When she opened her eyes, the world had changed. The sky was not the colorless dome she remembered from Harrow Creek's mornings. It shimmered with low golden haze, a true dawn. Thin clouds drifted lazily, painted with rose and amber. The sun had risen fully, its rays slicing through the trees in angled columns that looked almost solid. For the first time in years, there were birds. They sang tentatively at first, as if testing whether it was safe to speak again. Then the sound swelled, trills and whistles tumbling over one another, filling the air with something that felt almost foreign after so long. Junie lay still and listened, tears prickling the corners of her eyes. A bird call, a breeze, a heartbeat that wasn't hers. She was alive. She turned her head slowly. Izzy lay a few feet away, sprawled in the grass, face streaked with dirt and tears. Her jacket was torn, her hair tangled, but her chest rose and fell. Alive. Junie pushed herself up on shaky arms, every muscle stiff, her body an archive of pain. She couldn't remember when she'd fallen or how they'd escaped their collapse. Everything after the blinding light was a blur of heat, pressure, and the sound of Mixon's voice dissolving into air. The name rose in her throat like a wound. Mixon, her voice cracked. And then soft, small, came a reply. A groan. A rustle. Junie's heart stopped. She turned. There, a few yards from her, half buried under torn grass and dust, a small figure stirred. For a moment she didn't believe it couldn't. Her eyes refused to make sense of the shape, the tousled hair, the faint rise and fall of breath. Then the truth struck, wild and sharp. Mixon! She crawled toward him, stumbling, slipping, nearly falling over herself. Her hands shook as she reached him, brushed dust from his face. His skin was warm, his pulse steady beneath her fingertips. Mixon, hey, she whispered, voice trembling with disbelief. Hey, it's me. It's Junie. You're safe now. We're out. His eyelids fluttered. A faint hum escaped his lips, a tiny echo of that sound she thought she'd lost forever. Then his eyes opened. They were the same gray-blue she remembered, but there was something else there now, a faint shimmer in the irises, like a reflection of light that wasn't coming from the sun. Not unnatural, not alien, just different. He looked up at her, confused and small, and for a heartbeat everything in the world stopped. Junie? Her breath broke. She laughed and sobbed all at once, pulling him into her arms. He clung to her like a child waking from a nightmare. Izzy stirred at the sound, groaning softly as she sat up. When she saw them, she froze. Oh my God, she breathed. Junie, is that? Junie nodded, unable to speak, tears streaking her dirt-covered face. Izzy crawled closer, eyes wide, as if afraid Mixon might vanish if she blinked too hard. He looked between them both, blinking slowly. It's morning? He asked. Junie laughed again, the sound breaking halfway through. Yeah, buddy, it's morning. He smiled, small and tired. I heard you singing. Junie's chest constricted. She brushed his hair back, hands trembling. You heard me? I followed it, he murmured. It was like the light. She didn't know what that meant, not really, but it didn't matter. He was here, alive, warm in her arms. Izzy leaned back, watching the two of them, tears glinting in her lashes. You did it, Junie, she said softly. You brought him home. Junie looked down at Mixon again at the faint, almost imperceptible shimmer beneath his skin when the sunlight hit him just right. Brought him home. But part of her wasn't sure if the words still fit. They stayed in the field for a long time, afraid to move, afraid the spell would break. The hum was gone, the earth beneath them silent, still. The only sounds were the wind and the birds and the quiet rustle of trees in the distance. When they finally stood, their legs unsteady, the world felt impossibly large. The ruins of the mine were far behind them, just a low ridge of collapsed stone half swallowed by grass. Harrow Creek shimmered on the horizon, the sunlight bouncing off rooftops that hadn't reflected light in years. As they walked toward it, the silence shifted. The town was waking up. Doors creaked open. Voices called. Someone shouted, and then another, and soon a wave of confused, disbelieving noise rippled through the streets. People stepped out into the daylight, shielding their eyes. Some laughed, some wept. For the first time in years, the town square filled with human voices that weren't whispers. Junie and Izzy reached the edge of Main Street as a crowd gathered, familiar faces streaked with tears and soot. The old clock tower, frozen for years at 4:13, began to tick. A child pointed at the sky, squealing. Birds, look! And sure enough, a flock wheeled above the rooftops, black silhouettes cutting across the morning light. It felt impossible. Izzy reached out, gripping Junie's hand. We actually made it. Junie squeezed back, the warmth of her friend's fingers grounding her. The townsfolk saw them then, two girls, filthy, trembling, walking out of the dawn with a small boy between them. Junie saw recognition spark in their eyes. Some gasped, some simply stared. Her mother was the first to move. She came running down the street barefoot, her nightgown tangled around her knees, hair wild, face crumpling with disbelief. She stopped short when she reached them, her hands trembling. Mixon, she whispered. He looked up, blinking, then smiled. Hi, Mom. The sound that left her throat was somewhere between a sob and a laugh. She gathered him into her arms, crying into his hair, clutching him so tightly Junie thought she might never let go. Junie stood back, watching them, her chest hollow and full all at once. Izzy's hand found her shoulder. You did it, she said again, quieter now. Junie didn't answer. Because somewhere beneath the joy, beneath the sound of laughter and crying and the clock's steady ticking, she heard it. Faint, deep. A single note, low, resonant, humming through the soles of her feet. Not loud enough for anyone else to notice, just enough to remind her that the silence wasn't absolute. That night, Harrow Creek glowed. For the first time in nearly a decade, people lit candles in their windows. Music, real music, played from an old radio someone had found and repaired. The sound was rough, tinny, but beautiful. Children danced in the street, their shadows flickering across the cracked pavement. The curfew bells never rang. The floodlights that had guarded the town's edge stayed dark. Junie sat on the porch steps, watching it all unfold. Izzy sat beside her, their shoulders touching, a blanket draped over both of them. Mixon was inside, asleep on the couch, his small hands still glowing faintly beneath the lamplight. Izzy broke the quiet. He looks okay, she said, voice low. Better than I expected. Junie nodded slowly. He is. But her gaze stayed fixed on the horizon, Beyond the town, the dark hills loomed silent, still, and yet somehow awake. "You hear it, don't you?" Izzy asked. Junie hesitated, then nodded. "Sometimes." Izzy exhaled, a small, resigned smile tugging at her mouth. "Guess it never really goes away." "No," Junie said softly. "But maybe that's not a bad thing?" They sat there until the candles guttered out, until the first light of dawn began to creep over the rooftops again. Junie stood, stretching, and looked back toward the window where Mixon slept. He stirred in his sleep, humming faintly the same tune she had sung to find him. The sound vibrated through the glass, barely audible. A promise, maybe, or a warning. She smiled, tired and sad and full of something she couldn't quite name. Dawn. Junie walked down the quiet street, the morning air cool against her face. The sky was pale blue, the birds louder now. Harrow Creek was waking real waking, not the half-life it had known since the event. She paused at the end of the road and looked back. Smoke curled from chimneys. Someone laughed. Someone else sang. Life. Her eyes drifted to the hills beyond the place where it had all begun. The mines were sealed now, buried under tons of rock and silence, but she could feel it still, faint and steady, like a pulse deep beneath the earth. Not menacing, not angry, just alive. She spoke quietly, more to herself than anyone else. Maybe the dark didn't die. A pause. The wind shifted. Maybe it just learned to listen back. The light touched her face, and for the first time since the world had gone silent, Junie smiled, without fear. Chapter 25. The Quiet Rebuild. For weeks, Harrow Creek existed in a strange kind of half-light. Not dark anymore, not haunted but not yet healed. The mine's collapse had silenced something deep beneath the town, but the quiet it left behind didn't feel empty. It felt expectant, like the earth was holding its breath. Every morning, Junie woke to the sound of hammers, nails biting into fresh wood, sawdust and laughter mixing in the air. The townsfolk moved through the ruins like they were relearning how to be human again, tentative at first, then louder, more certain. Windows were replaced. Paint was scraped and reapplied in bright colors that had no memory of gray. Someone hung paper lanterns along the main street, and every night they lit up like fireflies. The curfew signs were the first thing to go. Old, rusted boards that had once read "Stay indoors after dusk" were pulled down and tossed into bonfires. The first night the fires burned, the whole town gathered. Izzy had brought an old speaker one that barely worked. When she plugged it into the generator, static filled the air. Then, slowly, a song. It was scratchy and distant, a recording of a woman singing in a trembling voice, but the sound of it made people weep. They danced anyway, barefoot on the cracked concrete, their shadows rippling in the orange light. Junie watched from the edge of the crowd, a paper cup of cider in her hands, feeling like the world was balancing between dream and memory. The hum was gone mostly. Sometimes, if the wind moved a certain way, she thought she heard it again, deep under her skin. But then someone would laugh, or a child would shout, and the feeling would dissolve. She wasn't sure if that meant the dark had truly gone quiet, or if she had just learned to live around it. Mixon adjusted faster than anyone expected. He spent his days drawing, always sitting near a window or outside in the sun. His sketches filled entire notebooks. Birds, clouds, blades of grass, sunlight on water, things that moved. Sometimes Junie would catch him humming softly under his breath while he drew. It wasn't the old hum, not quite. It was gentler, threaded through with rhythm, like the earth itself was remembering how to make music. At night, though, she would wake to find him sitting upright, eyes open, listening to something she couldn't hear. When she asked him what it was, he always said the same thing. They're quieter now. She didn't ask who they were. Junie tried to help with the rebuilding, painting fences, clearing rubble, but she moved like someone learning to inhabit her own body again. The silence pressed against her in new ways. When the nights grew still, she would step outside her house and stand barefoot on the porch. The air was sharp and cold, full of crickets and the scent of pine. She would listen not for danger exactly, but for the rhythm of the ground beneath her feet. Most nights there was nothing. Some nights there was something small, a pulse that felt like memory. She didn't tell Izzy. Izzy had thrown herself into repair work with the same reckless energy she used to throw rocks at warning signs. She fixed generators, patched roofs, rewired the town hall lights so they glowed soft and amber instead of the harsh white that used to buzz through every night. "She's becoming an engineer," someone joked one day. Izzy had laughed. "Guess I'm making up for lost time." Junie watched her climb ladders and shout directions, hair tied back with an old bandana, cheeks streaked with grease. Every so often, Izzy would catch her watching and flash a grin that could melt iron. Their friendship had changed since the collapse. It was quieter now, but deeper, like the way light reflects stronger after it's passed through water. They didn't need to talk about the cavern, or the frequency, or the things they'd seen when the dark broke open. They both carried those memories like scars under their clothes, too personal to name, but impossible to forget. Sometimes, when the town slept and the candles guttered out, they would walk the streets together. No curfews, no fear, just the sound of their shoes against the asphalt, and the faint rustle of wind through the empty lots. "Feels weird," Izzy said once, "to not be scared." Junie nodded. "It's like my brain keeps waiting for something to start humming again." Izzy chuckled softly. "Maybe we're the ones who hum now." Junie smiled. "Maybe." The town started holding market days again by the third week. People sold bread, seeds, hand-carved trinkets. Someone brought jars of honey from hives that had somehow survived. Someone else set up a table of old vinyl records, warped and scratched, but still playable. Music became part of everything. Children sang while painting fences. Someone built a wind chime made entirely from old flashlight casings and hung it outside the general store. It made it a strange metallic harmony that seemed to shift with the breeze. At dusk, groups would gather with candles just to watch the flames move. Junie would stand among them, the warm glow flickering across her hands, and think of how the creatures in the mines had glowed when they sang how terrifying and beautiful that had been. Sometimes she wondered if they'd been trying to say something, not destroy. If the dark hadn't hated them at all, it had just wanted to be understood. By mid-month, Harrow Creek had a new kind of rhythm. Not the one it had before the event, or the silence after something in between. People spoke in laughter more often than whispers. Children ran through the streets without looking over their shoulders. Windows stayed open at night. The town's river, once thick with silt and runoff, had begun to clear. Someone found tadpoles near the banks. Someone else said they'd seen fireflies near the woods. Life, returning. Slowly, cautiously. And yet, sometimes when Junie passed the old mining road, now blocked by a crude wooden fence, she could feel a tremor beneath her ribs. Not fear, just knowing. The hum had gone deeper. It wasn't gone. Mixon had started drawing people again. One evening, he showed Junie a sketchbook filled with faces everyone from town, rendered in light pencil. Near the back, he'd drawn the three of them, Junie, Izzy, and himself, sitting in the field where the dawn first came. In the background, the grass rippled like sound waves. "I like it," Junie said, smiling. "But what's that behind us?" He tilted his head. "It's what it looks like when things listen." She didn't know how to answer that. One afternoon, she found Izzy sitting by the river, skipping stones. Junie joined her, letting her feet dangle in the cold water. "Think they'll ever stop talking about us?" Junie asked. Izzy grinned. "The girls who killed the dark? Doubt it." Junie smirked faintly. "We didn't kill it." "No," Izzy said. "We just changed the station." They laughed, the sound drifting over the rippling water. For a while, they sat in silence, watching the current. The air smelled of rain. Junie looked at Izzy, really looked. The smudges under her eyes, the burn scar on her wrist, the little twitch in her smile when she tried not to cry. "We made it," Junie said softly. Izzy glanced over, eyes shining. "Yeah, we did." A long pause. Then Junie whispered, "I still hear it sometimes." Izzy didn't flinch. "I know. Me too." Their reflections trembled on the surface of the river, side by side alive, scarred, whole. That night, as Junie lay in bed, she stared at the ceiling and listened. The walls of her room creaked softly. Outside, crickets played their endless song. Her heartbeat slowed, steady. The hum wasn't there tonight, or maybe it was. Too low to name. Either way, she didn't fear it anymore. It was part of the world now, the same way grief was, and love and sound. She thought of Izzy's laugh, of Mixon's sketches, of the way the town had begun to glow again after so many years of gray. And when she finally closed her eyes, she dreamed not of the mines, or the creatures, or the noise that had once nearly torn the world apart, but of light moving through the cracks, slow and kind, like dawn remembering how to return. Chapter 26. Afterlight. Evening draped itself over Harrow Creek like a sigh. The light wasn't sharp anymore. It moved softer, as though the sun itself had learned caution. Junie walked the quiet streets with her hands in her pockets, feeling the hum of the town, not the old kind, not the one that lived under their bones, but something gentler. The murmur of wind through half-rebuilt houses, the creak of porch swings, the laughter of a family sharing supper 2 doors down. For the first time in years, the quiet didn't feel dangerous. Her boots scuffed against the gravel road. The air carried the faint smell of sawdust and new paint. It had been months since the collapse, and yet some part of her still expected the ground to tremble, for the world to hum itself open again. But the earth stayed still. Alive, yes, listening always, but still. She turned down Main Street. The lanterns strung across the buildings had been replaced by real bulbs, now soft amber lights that buzzed faintly when the wind caught them. Junie paused outside the general store. The old curfew sign had been repurposed as a bench. Someone had painted wildflowers over the warning letters. It made her smile. Across the street, the river caught the last of the day's light, turning it molten. Fireflies hovered just above its surface, the kind of thing she'd forgotten the world could make without pain. Somewhere, music played, a record turning slow, the melody warped but tender. She didn't need to know who had put it on. It was enough that someone had. She passed the rebuilt library, the place where she used to sneak books about the mines, about sound, about resonance. The new one smelled like oak and lemon oil, and the shelves were bright with fresh paper. A "Quiet Please" sign hung near the front desk, and Junie almost laughed when she saw it. Quiet used to mean survival. Now it meant peace. Still, when she stepped inside it, she moved softly, out of habit. Her fingers brushed the spines of books, as if they might wake. She found the small corner window where she used to sit with Mixon years ago, before the dark came. The seat had been repaired, the cushions replaced. For a moment she saw them there. 2 kids huddled over some dusty book about whales or echolocation, whispering so the librarian wouldn't hear. And then it was gone, just another ripple of memory. She left a folded page from one of Mixon's old notebooks on the windowsill before she left. A drawing of sound made visible loops and swirls that looked almost alive. The sun had almost set when she reached the edge of town. The fence that marked the old mining road was still there, though now it was covered in wildflowers and wind chimes. Someone, Izzy, probably had hung them weeks ago, so that when the wind blew, the metal and glass would sing softly over the sealed earth. Junie stood there for a while, listening. Each chime had its own voice, and together they made something almost harmonic. Not perfect, but close. She wondered if the creatures, wherever they were now deeper, quieter, could hear it too. "Hey!" a voice called behind her. She turned to see Izzy walking toward her, carrying a basket of tools. Her face was smudged with dirt, and her hair glowed copper in the dying light. "You keep coming here," Izzy said, setting the basket down. "You expecting the ground to open up again?" Junie smiled faintly. "Maybe I'm just making sure it doesn't." Izzy grinned, but there was a softness in it. "You know, you don't have to keep watch anymore." "I know." They stood together, the wind curling around them, carrying the soft, hollow ring of the chimes. "Do you ever miss it?" Junie asked quietly. Izzy frowned. "Miss what?" "The hum." Izzy tilted her head, thinking. "Sometimes, not the fear, just the feeling. Like we were standing next to something enormous, something that cared enough to notice us." Junie nodded. "I get that." A silence fell between them. Not awkward, Not heavy, just space. Finally, Izzy said, "Mixon's been looking for you. He's out by the schoolyard again." Junie glanced back toward town. "Drawing?" "Always." Izzy picked up her basket, brushed off her jeans, and smiled. "Don't stay out too long, all right?" Junie smirked. "You sound like the old curfew signs." Izzy rolled her eyes. "Go see your brother." The sky had gone violet by the time Junie reached the schoolyard. The swings creaked gently in the wind, and the chalk lines of old games were still faintly visible on the cracked pavement. Mixon sat cross-legged in the grass, a sketchbook open on his knees. His face was lit by the last scraps of sunlight, and he was humming softly a tune that rose and fell like breathing. Junie recognized it immediately. Their mother's song. The one that used to echo down the hallway when they were little, when the world was still simple and the dark was just the dark. She sat beside him without speaking. For a long time, they'd just listened to the song, to the wind, to the sound of crickets tracing patterns through the night. When he finally looked up, his eyes caught the faintest shimmer of reflected light, like something deeper still lived in them. "You hear it too?" he said. Junie swallowed. "The hum?" He shook his head slowly. "No, the afterlight." She frowned. "What's that?" Mixon turned a page in his sketchbook, revealing a drawing unlike any of the others. It wasn't sunlight or trees or people. It was something abstract, flowing lines and spirals, like light bent through sound. "It's what's left after noise stops," he said quietly. "The part that keeps glowing, even when no one's listening." Junie didn't answer. Her throat felt too tight for words. The world had always been too loud, too full of grief, too heavy with echoes. Now it was still, and she didn't quite know how to live in that stillness yet. But maybe this was how it began. Not with silence, but with listening. The last of the daylight sank behind the ridge. The town lights flickered on, one by one small constellations, stitched into the valley. Mixon closed his sketchbook and leaned against her shoulder. "Do you think it's gone forever?" he asked. Junie looked out over Harrow Creek at the rebuilt roofs, the glowing windows, the faint wisp of smoke curling up from the baker's chimney. "No," she said softly. "I think it learned to be quiet." He nodded, as though that made perfect sense. They sat there until the stars came out. Fireflies blinked in the tall grass, mirroring the lights below. Somewhere, in the far distance, thunder rolled. Or maybe it was something deeper, a note from the world beneath them, low and slow and kind. Junie listened, smiling faintly. "Maybe the dark didn't die," she whispered. "Maybe it just learned to listen back." The wind carried her words into the trees, where they dissolved into the hum of the living earth. And for the first time, it sounded like peace. Thanks for listening. Stay cozy, and I'll see you in the next story.